Thank you very much, Ollie. And welcome, everyone. I hope you are all having a wonderful evening. Great to see you all. Please feel free to use the chat box in the side to say hello. And of course, if you have any questions, you can use the chat box anytime, and I will answer your questions. There will be a Q&A section right at the end, and in that part, you can talk with me directly using your microphones. So, without any further ado, let's get started. So today, we're going to prepare you for interviews. We're going to talk about what the interview is assessing, what the examiners or the admissions committees are looking for. We'll talk about the different interview formats, recorded versus live, and how they feel for students. We'll touch on the SOP versus the interview, talking about key differences and mistakes that students tend to make. At the end, we will talk about how to prepare effectively before the Q&A. So let's get straight in with what is the interview assessing. This slide shows the four main things that interviewers are assessing across almost all university interviews. Everything that we are going to talk about today fits into one of these areas. So first, interviewers are listening to how clearly you communicate ideas. This does not mean perfect English. You don't need to worry so much about your grammar and sentence patterns. You should be speaking clearly. This means, can the admissions committee follow your thinking without getting lost? Second, they're checking whether your choices and goals make sense. They're trying to understand the logic behind your decisions, not whether your plans sound impressive. And we'll look at this in more detail a little bit later. Third, they are listening carefully to how well you reflect on experiences. This is not about listing achievements, showing how good you were in your undergrad or how good you were at how high your GPA is. This is about showing awareness of what you have learned and how your thinking has developed over time. Finally, interviewers are forming a judgment about your potential to succeed in the program. And this is not based on one answer, but rather the overall picture that emerges from how you answer. Are you showing your thinking? Are you explaining why you are the perfect fit for this university? And of course, have you responded to the right question? You would be amazed how often students answer the wrong question just because of nerves. And we'll talk more about how to get over that a little bit later. So let's take a look at what this means in practice. This is a very common interview question. Why do you want to study this subject? I have always been deeply interested in this field. because it is very important in modern society and offers many opportunities for future development. I believe this subject will help me broaden my horizons and improve my abilities in various aspects. So please, using the chat box, on a scale of 1 being very bad and 5 being very good, what would you give this answer? How good is this? Please send a number in the chat box. Thank you, Hita. Sorry, I can't translate your name. Thank you very much. Okay. We've got 3, we've got 4. Welcome, Ling, good to see you. MKB gives it a 4. And I can't translate your name, but thank you very much, a 3. So most students think this is a good answer, a 3 or a 4. Thank you very much, Ashley. Now, I won't give you the answer just yet. Let's take a look at another answer. Same question. I teach English to high school students, and I see that students work hard, but still make the same mistakes often. I tried different teaching techniques, but I wasn't able to reach all students. I want to study this program because I need a better understanding of how students process language. So now do the same. What do you think? 1 being a very bad answer, 5 being a very good answer. Rank it from 1 to 5. Thank you, Elva, Hita. Yes, very good. Clear motivation, excellent. So what do you think? What is the difference between number 1 and number 2? What is the most important difference between these 2 responses? And thank you so much for participating. I really appreciate it. Yes, very good, MKB. More personal background. We've got a very clear reason for why this person wants to study this subject. Their students have been struggling. They've identified a problem. They've shown how they've tried to address it. I tried many techniques, but I just can't get it to work. Therefore, this is my problem. Here's how I'm going to address it. I need a better understanding of how they process language. If we take a look at the first response, this is very, very weak. Let's take a look at why. Oh, sorry. The first example has great word choices. Modern society, future development, broaden my horizons, deeply interested. But it doesn't actually give us any information. I have no idea what problem this student has, why they need to come to this university, or what they're going to study, or how it's going to help them. There's just not enough information. So how do we avoid these problems? First up, choices and goals. Do they make sense? When interviewers are asking about your choices and goals, they're not judging whether your plans sound impressive. I'm going to be the CEO of Apple within 3 years. Or I'm going to solve world hunger within 5 years. That's not required. Those are never going to happen. Well, they might happen if you're extremely lucky. But the key is they are checking whether your decisions follow a clear line of thinking. Have you identified a problem? Does this course solve the problem? Or perhaps you're changing direction. Changing direction is absolutely fine if you can explain why. And that's something I had to do. I was originally a banker, but then I changed my direction into healthcare. So I had to explain why I made that change in direction. So another thing that they care about is timing. They want to understand why you are choosing this subject right now, at this point in your life. Liking a subject is just not enough on its own. A strong answer will explain what triggered the decision. Perhaps there will be an experience that you went through, a problem that you noticed at work or in your research, or perhaps a point where you changed your thinking. This was the wrong direction for me, and I realized it through this experience. Another thing that they are listening for is connection. Your past experience does not need to match perfectly. For example, I was a banker in HSBC, but I moved into healthcare, diagnostic radiography. So that's a completely different track. What matters is whether you can explain how that experience connects to what you want to study next. So taking my example, working in a bank, I realized very quickly that I wanted to help people. So I thought helping people with their finances would work for me, but it didn't. I found that I was actually getting people worse off. So that's why I changed direction. And by explaining my thinking and my logic, that worked for me. So what matters most is whether you can explain how your previous experience connects to what you want to study next. As long as you show awareness and you're being honest, it will be a good answer. Finally, interviewers think about what comes next. They are not expecting you to have everything planned out step by step. And they're not looking for big promises about future success, like we mentioned earlier. Realistic goals are much stronger than overly ambitious goals. For example, a good response to this would be, I plan to start off as a diagnostic radiographer working in a local hospital. But in the future, I see myself specializing in computerized tomography or mammography, whichever specialism you want to do. Now, what causes concern is when the goals are either very vague or clearly unrealistic. So perhaps your goal, a vague goal, would be, I want to help underserved communities. That's a very common line that I see in SOPs. I want to help underserved communities. However, they haven't shown the link. What underserved communities? Do you mean elderly people? People who live in rural backgrounds? Do you mean pediatrics, young children? You must prove what you're going to say with evidence. Support your goals. An unrealistic goal is the same as not answering the question. So when interviewers are listening to your answers here, they're not asking about excitement. They're trying to see whether your story makes sense. So how do we show that our story makes sense? We reflect on our past experiences and we prove the need for study. Now, I'm sure that you've already gone through this in the SOP, but it's slightly different when we're speaking. When interviewers are asking about your experiences, they're not really asking you to list what you've done. They already know that. They've read through your CV. They've read through your personal statement or your SOP or your academic piece of writing. What they are listening for is how you think about those experiences and how they link to what you're trying to do now at university. So a strong answer usually focuses on what you noticed or learned, not just the activity itself. A lot of students will spend a lot of time talking about the experience, what they did. That's not the most important aspect. Interviewers want to hear how that experience affected your thinking. Perhaps you realized that something did not work as you expected. Or perhaps you noticed a gap in your knowledge or understanding your own strengths and weaknesses clearly. This is why achievements alone are not enough. Success is not the main point. And in fact, talking about difficulties, mistakes, that is much more effective than singing your praises, talking about how good you are. Think about this. If you tell an admissions officer how good you are, how amazing you are, that's great. But they might be thinking in the back of their heads, why does this person need to come here? They don't have any issues. They don't have any problems. They're highly accomplished. That's why we need to focus on honest insight rather than perfect outcomes. Reflection appears when you explain why something worked or why it didn't work. It also appears when you can connect one experience to what you want to study next, or how that influenced your goal. Follow-up questions will be really important here because they show whether you have really thought about your experiences or whether you are still repeating prepared answers. So to wrap up this slide, when interviewers are asking about your experience, think about one simple question. Do you understand what those experiences mean for you now? And how have they shaped your next step? So this will be a good place to stop for a moment and ask for any questions. If you have a question, please let me know by sending it either in the chat box or open your microphone and talk with me directly. Just give a few seconds for any questions to come in. Okay, so let's move on. If any questions come in, I will check them for you. So your potential to succeed in this program at this university. So this part is about your overall potential. And interviewers here are starting to think less about individual answers and more about the whole picture. An interviewer here is thinking, are you likely to succeed in this specific program at this specific university? Why do I keep saying this specific? Because that's one area where students often make mistakes. They tend to give a very generic, general answer that could fit to any university or any program. So what should you do? Interviewers are not judging whether you are a good student in general, but whether this environment makes sense for you. They will be listening for signs that you understand what the program involves, such as the workload, teaching styles, types of assessment. Is there a placement? Is it practical work or is it mostly theoretical? Is there a lot of lab work involved? So here, you do not need to know every single detail about the university or the course, but you should show awareness that the university study will be demanding. It will be different from what you've done before. And you should clearly link how this university is going to help you succeed. For instance, in my degree, there were hospital placements. I had to work in clinical practice. And the university had diagnostic equipment inside the university, and real patients would come. So there was lots of practical application. And by talking about that, I showed how I understood how this program would benefit me. And I knew the program. They also pay attention to how you talk about challenges, any problems that you faced. A strong candidate will not pretend that things will be easy. As I mentioned earlier, mentioning difficulties, problems, these are great things to bring up. It shows how you plan to adapt. It shows maturity and self-awareness, which is a lot more important than confidence. A really confident, strong answer that shows how amazing you are is less likely to succeed than a really honest self-assessment. And as we mentioned, a key factor is how well you understand the university itself. an interviewer can very quickly notice if you cannot explain why this university is a good fit. Perhaps you looked at the program structure, available resources, a research focus that aligns with your research. And remember, it doesn't mean memorizing facts from the university. It means showing the interviewer how you would use these resources and these opportunities to help you succeed. They're also listening for consistency across your answers. Your goals, experience, and understanding of the program should all be pointing in the same direction. Small gaps in your CV or a weakness is not a problem if you are honest about them. I'll be talking about this a lot. Overconfidence and vague enthusiasm raises a lot more questions than thoughtful, honest self-assessment. So, to wrap this slide up, we are deciding whether you are ready to grow at this university on this program, not whether you already look like a perfect student or a future graduate. So now let's talk about interview formats. First up, the recorded interview. Just out of interest, which interview are you more nervous about? Recorded or live? Send your answers in the chat box. For me, it's recorded. And the first three are recorded as well. Hockey, heater, recorded. Does anyone think live is easier? Is harder, sorry. Looks like everyone agrees recorded is harder. Yes, I agree. Recorded interviews are very common these days, and it's usually delivered through an external platform rather than by the university directly. You will see different brand names like Kira Talent, HireVue, VidCruiter, or any other type of system. It doesn't matter the branding. The experience will be exactly the same. These platforms will ask you to respond to a set of fixed questions. There are no follow-ups. You will record either a short video answer or perhaps you type a timed written response. Sometimes you will be given a few seconds to prepare. And in some cases, you might be shown a scenario and asked how you would respond. As I said earlier, it does not matter which platform it is, but the process is automated and one way. Make sure you understand the format to help you, because you're interacting with a system rather than a person. There's no feedback, no opportunity for you to change or adjust your answer based on facial interaction from what the interviewer's face tells you. Once you begin speaking, or the timer has gone off, or when the time's up, that's it. The response is submitted automatically. Now, an important thing to understand, a Kira interview is designed to capture a complete response, not a perfect one. Small mistakes, hesitation, minor grammar issues, they are completely normal and expected. Even native speakers will make minor grammar errors, hesitations. They will use filler words like, So don't worry. You are not expected to produce perfection. Remember, clarity, clear answers, honest reflection. What causes students a lot of problems is stopping completely. They'll start an answer and then they'll just stop because they realize they've gone on a different track or they've answered a slightly different question. It is much better if you lose your train of thought to pause briefly, slow it down, and then carry on, rather than just panic and just freeze, stop. The other thing that students do is instead of freezing or stopping, they'll just continue talking, panicked talk. By giving yourself a moment to just stop, take a breath, think, and then go back into your response. That will be much better than just keeping on talking. Remember, you do not have a chance to clear any misunderstandings up later. So a clear beginning, middle, and end helps the person reviewing that recording to follow your thinking, even if the language you've used is not perfect. So by understanding how the platform works and focusing on better organization rather than memorization will help you stay calm under pressure. And we will talk about how to answer different types of questions a little bit later. So now let's take a look at the live format. Live formats, very different from a recorded one because you can interact. You're no longer talking to a robot, talking to your screen. You're responding to real people. And that changes what interviewers can assess. A live interview could be one-on-one, or it may involve a small panel with multiple people. In some cases, especially if it's a subject-heavy program, the interview may focus more on academic content or prior experience. Again, it doesn't matter about the format. The key feature is interaction and being conversational. Live interviews will allow for follow-up questions. If I hear something interesting or unclear, or maybe unexpected, I will ask you to explain further. I will challenge your reasoning, or perhaps I will change direction entirely. But that might be unpredictable, but it's not a trap. They're trying to find out how you think and can you deal with the pressure. Because of this, live interviews are not about delivering a perfect, polished answer. It's more about thinking out loud. Interviewers will be paying attention to how you respond when a question has been extended. Perhaps they've reframed a similar question to see how you deal with it. Or perhaps they will challenge what you've said. What they're trying to do is see if you can explain your reasoning. Can you stay calm when the conversation shifts? And are you being consistent and showing honest self-reflection. And again, being able to notice mistakes, being able to clarify your meaning, or refining your answer will work in your favor. Mistakes are not a problem in a live interview. What matters most is how you engage with the question. Have you answered what the interviewer is asking you? Have you provided lots of evidence for having that opinion? Now, again, we'll talk more about dealing with strategies a little bit later. Let's move on to the SOP versus the interview. Now, the SOP is very important. It is a document that allows students time to think and polish their ideas. In many cases, it's also reviewed by teachers, counselors, perhaps editors on Tutor ABC. So the SOP often represents a student's vision or a student's ideas in a highly structured, refined form. The interview serves a completely different purpose. It is not designed to repeat the SOP or personal statement, and it's not there to catch students out, but it is a verification step. The admissions officers will want to understand whether the ideas in the SOP genuinely belong to you. Can you explain those ideas naturally in real time? So one thing you'll probably have noticed with SOPs is that editors will look at your English scores, and we allow a certain amount of tolerance. For example, if you got a band 6 in IELTS, well, we're gonna write your SOP no higher than a band 7. There is a certain tolerance because it's been edited, revised, and supported. Now, a common issue the admissions teams encounter is a mismatch. The written application shows highly sophisticated language, complex ideas, and complex sentence structures. But during the interview, the student struggles to explain the same ideas clearly. Now, that doesn't automatically mean that you've done anything dishonest, but it does raise questions about independence, have you written it yourself, readiness, and your ability to communicate. So your SOP should be just a bit higher than your spoken abilities. Now, another thing that students tend to do is repeat SOP sentences in interviews. Now, this is very, very risky because interviewers are not looking for memorized language. We're listening for understanding. So interviewers want to hear the same ideas expressed in the SOP, but in your own spoken words, even if the language is simpler and less polished. Teachers, admissions officers, we can spot a memorized answer very, very easily. A simple, clearly spoken answer that reflects your genuine, real thinking is much stronger than a perfectly written paragraph that sounds like someone's just reading it out. So in short, the SOP opens the door, but the interview shows how you think. Authenticity matters much, much more than elegance. So never repeat sentences from your SOP. A clear, honest explanation is always much better than a pre-prepared answer that you read out loud. So now let's get on to the interesting parts for you. Common interview mistakes. I am applying for this program to contribute to interdisciplinary innovation by leveraging the scientific expertise I have cultivated through extensive academic training and research. What problem can you identify with this answer? Send your answers in the chat box. Too ambitious. No, it's not very ambitious. But thank you for that answer. It sounds ambitious, but it's not really. The problems are quite a few. First, memorization. This answer sounds pre-prepared in advance. This is not someone thinking in real time. Interviews are designed to see how you think and to see if you can explain those answers under time pressure. So an answer like this, it sounds like it's been read off an SOP. It sounds overly rehearsed, very sophisticated language, but not much else given. Second, emptiness. The language is advanced. We've got interdisciplinary innovation, leveraging extensive expertise. But nothing concrete has actually been communicated. There's no experience. What scientific expertise do you have? How do you plan to contribute? There's nothing here. No experience, no decision, no difficulty, no learning point. I cannot understand who this person is or why they fit this university. And of course, mismatch. Imagine this situation. A student has an IELTS band 6, perfectly acceptable for many courses. But this is not an IELTS band 6 answer. This is something much closer to an 8 or a 9. Alarm bells are ringing. This is not the student speaking. This is not their voice. The gap is immediately noticeable. Even though we're not judging your English level here, they are going to question your authenticity and independence. So that's why reading from your SOP or producing some ChatGPT answers in advance is not recommended. It's very risky. Written English and spoken English are not the same thing. So the key message is this. They reward honesty. They punish dramatic performance. Admissions, they want to meet you, the real student, not the written document that they've already read through. Next, it was important because I learned a lot and it helped me understand teamwork and communication and also time management And I think these skills are very useful for my future studies. And I like it very much. And it helps. What's wrong with this answer? Not bad, yes. There are too many ands. Think about everything that I've been talking about already. What is really important for you to get across to the interviewer? I'm thinking of a word beginning with P or E. Yes, very good. It's too general. There are no concrete ideas, no goals, no evidence, no proof. Just a lot of statements that show how good they are. Teamwork, good communicator, management, very useful. I learned a lot. What did you learn? So, the problem is structure. The answer starts, but it never really goes anywhere. Ideas are added one after the other. But none of these points are explained. So this sounds like a student who understands the topic, but cannot control their thinking, cannot prove that these experiences actually happened. The interviewer is left thinking, what was the main point? What did the student actually learn? This kind of answer would often appear if a student is really nervous and just trying to keep talking and pushing forwards without taking that deep breath, pausing, and organizing their thoughts. Interviewers do not want a long answer with lots of important buzzwords. They want a clear answer. So even stopping briefly and just saying, these are the two things that I learned, that would immediately improve this response. They would show the situation and what they learned. So if you only take away one thing from this slide, when you feel pressure, slow down. Structure matters much more than speed. A short, focused answer is always stronger than one that just goes on and drifts away from the original question and your meaning. Next mistake. I want to learn more about this subject and develop myself so I can be prepared for the future. What's wrong with this? What you could have done is copied and pasted Hockey's last answer. It's too general, no concrete ideas, no real goals. The answer is too polite, it's sensible, it's boring, it's harmless, it's safe. Students often give answers like this because they're trying not to say anything wrong. They want to be positive. They want to be flexible. But from an interviewer's response, from an interviewer's perspective, this gives them nothing to work with. These phrases, learn more, develop, prepare for the future, they are so generic that they could apply to any subject or any student. There's no self-assessment, self-awareness. So remember, they want to know what you mean by learning more. What exactly do you want to improve? Where is the weakness? What experience showed you that you have this weakness? And how is this university going to help you address that weakness? So remember, simple, specific answers with clear examples are much better than a safe, polite answer that doesn't say anything. And I'll just touch on this one briefly. I'm very good at teamwork and leadership. Again, it's just positivity. There's nothing that supports it. We are not evaluating personality traits. We're evaluating thinking and experience. If you make a claim, the interviewer immediately thinks, based on what? So if someone answered this in one of my interviews, I would ask the following. Can you give me an example? How do you know that? If the student can't answer, you've lost credibility. In a recorded interview, the problem's even bigger because, as you know, there is no opportunity for you to clarify or add examples later. So it just sits there. And because you haven't backed it up, the interviewer has no reason to believe this. So the key idea is this. Every claim you make should be supported with something you did, noticed, or learned. If you cannot support something, then do not say it at all. Okay, on to how to prepare effectively. How to avoid making mistakes. Many students will prepare for an interview the wrong way. They memorize full answers. They have highly polished language and rehearse a perfect answer for every possible question. That sounds like a good idea, right? But unfortunately, it leads to panic and answering the wrong question. What works instead is a different mindset. Good preparation focuses on experience, not wording. Instead of writing out full answers, what you should do is prepare a small number of real experiences from your study, from your work, or from your daily life. And for each experience, you should be clear on what happened, what was difficult, and of course, what did you learn? When you prepare this way, you do not need a script. You can adapt naturally to different questions because you are explaining something that you understand. You're not trying to recall exact sentences or reading from a script. This will keep your language honest. And when you speak at your real level, it avoids the mismatch that interviewers tend to notice. If you are preparing well, it should feel flexible so that you are able to respond calmly to any question, even if the words and phrasing is not perfect. And that's what the interview is designed to test. So, how do we prepare? There are two different strategies for two different question types. Now, on this slide, I want to be very, very clear about something important. There are two different things happening in an interview question. First, there's the focus of the question. And second, the evidence you use to answer it. Now, students often confuse the two. which is where many mistakes come from. So, if you are asked a question about your experience, something like, tell me about a challenge you faced, describe a time you had to make a difficult decision, what did you learn from this project? A framework like STAR-L is extremely useful during preparation, before the interview. This format will help you to organize your thinking in advance. It reminds you to explain the situation, what you did, your responsibilities, the results, and most importantly, what you learned. But this is the most important part, and it's truly crucial. This is not a script to memorize. You are not supposed to recite these 5 parts in the interview. This is what you do before to prepare. When you are actually in the interview, you might just talk about 1 or 2 of these things. You would talk about the action, the result, and what you learned. Maybe you would talk about the action, then go into the situation, and then go into learning. You would pick different parts so that your answers are flexible. Remember, this is a framework for preparation, not memorization. Now, not all questions are about experience. Some questions, like motivation, reasoning, future plans. In those cases, using STAR-L can make things a lot worse. So, the idea for here, if you are asked about your experience, use this framework to help you. However, when reasoning is the focus, use ORE. This tool is much more effective. Opinion, reason, explanation. You start by stating your position clearly and explain why this makes sense. Remember, admissions want to hear your logic, your thinking. Now, you can add a short explanation or example, but it should be brief. 1 sentence is often enough. And of course, if you've been given 90 seconds and you've got extra time, you can have more than 1 reason, more than 1 explanation, or an example. So ORE is very, very flexible. It keeps your answer focused and clear, preventing vague responses and forced long explanations. So remember, use STAR-L to talk about experiences when you are preparing. Don't go through it like a script. And use ORE to explain your thinking. So that is the end of our presentation. Final reminders. Listen to the question before answering and make sure you answer the question that has been asked. Choose the right approach. Are we talking about experience or reasoning? And of course, remember to sound like yourself, not your SOP. So, do we have any questions before we finish for today?
Does anybody have any questions for Stewart? 大家有任何问题吗？都可以留言发问，或者是直接举手。我们再稍微等待一下。But thank you so much, Stewart, for the section. It was very, very insightful information that definitely helped the student to prepare for the interview practice.
You're very welcome. And thank you, everyone, for sending those answers and ideas in the chat box.
Okay.
Take care, and I wish you the best of luck in your interviews.
Thank you so much, Stewart. 那大家晚安，如果有问题的话都可以发问，然后我这边的话会跟大家分享一下，如果我看到蛮多是我的学生，还有我们这边已经是 Today DC 在留学的学生准备中，然后如果是有特别想要询问面试的练习，也是可以加我们的 LINE 来询问，我们有特别是做模拟面试的一个 practice section。但是还是很感谢大家的时间，今天，然后我们就先到这边做一个结束，谢谢大家，晚安，拜拜。